5 a.m. Crash. Glass exploding like a bomb in the dead silence. I'm up instantly, Marine training kicking in. But this isn't Baghdad. This is suburban Phoenix, and someone just declared war on my driveway. I peer through my blinds and nearly choke on my rage. Vivian Blackwood, our precious HOA president, is going full psychopath on my buddy Connor's F-350 with a crowbar. Designer workout clothes, diamond tennis bracelet catching streetlight as she takes another swing. Crash. 8 grand in damage and counting. She actually pauses to check her manicure between blows. The audacity. Here's what this entitled witch doesn't know. My security cameras are rolling. And Connor? He's not just some blue-collar veteran she can terrorize. When she finds out what his day job really is, that Botox smile is going to crack like her victims' windshields. What would you do if some power-drunk lunatic destroyed your guest's property? Drop a comment with where you're watching from. Bet your HOA's got psychos too. Let me back up 6 months and explain how I ended up in this suburban war zone. Name's Garrett Thornfield, 52, divorced, Purple Heart recipient who thought he'd found peace in Saguaro Springs, a cookie-cutter subdivision where every house looks like it was squeezed from the same beige tube of mediocrity. After losing half my assets in the divorce, this modest ranch was all I could afford. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and apparently a front-row seat to watching democracy die under a designer handbag. The morning air here smells like creosote and broken dreams, with that distinctive scent of fresh asphalt baking under the Arizona sun. Every dawn brings the symphony of leaf blowers, because apparently in suburbia, even the desert isn't allowed to look natural. 847 identical homes, all sporting mandatory desert landscaping that looks like someone sneezed cacti across expensive gravel. Connor's my Marine buddy from Iraq. We served 2 tours together, came home with matching invisible scars. Now he drives down from Phoenix once a month for our PTSD support group meetings. Good man, quiet type, always brings coffee that doesn't taste like motor oil. His F-350 is his pride and joy. Pristine white paint, veteran plates, not a scratch on her. Well, wasn't. Enter Vivian Blackwood, the she-devil in Prada, who rules our little slice of suburban purgatory. 48 years old, real estate agent, married to a plastic surgeon, which explains why her face moves about as much as a mannequin's. Lives in the corner mansion that probably costs more than most people's lifetime earnings. No kids, but treats the entire neighborhood like her personal boot camp, where she's the drill sergeant from hell. This woman drives a white Tesla Model X and has been HOA president for 3 consecutive terms. Nobody runs against her because, frankly, who wants to volunteer for that particular form of torture? My first taste of Vivian's special brand of freedom crushing came 3 months after I moved in. I put up an American flag on my front porch, standard 3x5, nothing fancy. The next day, a bright yellow violation notice appeared under my windshield wiper, like some kind of legal disease. Unapproved flag placement, fine, $300. I called the HOA office, thinking this had to be a mistake. Wrong. Flags must be mounted on regulation poles at specific angles, the secretary explained in that special tone reserved for people she thinks are particularly dense. Approved by the architectural committee. Who's on this committee? I asked. Mrs. Blackwood. Just Vivian. The architectural committee was literally one person with a god complex. The crunch of decorative gravel under my boots, walking to that first board meeting, should have been my warning. The community center smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and crushed souls. 5 board members sat behind a folding table, like they were judging war crimes instead of homeowner complaints. I presented my case politely. Purple Heart veteran, served my country, just want to display the flag with respect. The vote? 4-1 against me. Vivian's cronies didn't even look up from their phones while rubber stamping her decision. Perhaps, Vivian said with that plastic smile, you should have read the CC&Rs more carefully before purchasing. Connor was visiting that week, witnessed the whole flag fiasco. Being the stand-up guy he is, he parked his truck in the designated guest spot and stayed 4 days to help me file an appeal. That's when Vivian struck again. Commercial vehicle restriction, she declared, slapping us with a $500 fine. Connor's F-350 was clearly personal use. Camping gear in the back, veteran plates, family photos on the dashboard. But apparently, Vivian's definition of commercial vehicle included any pickup truck that made her Tesla look inadequate. Connor just shook his head. "It's not worth the fight, Garrett. I'll pay it." Watching this good man, who'd bled for our freedom, hand over $500 to some suburban dictator made my blood pressure spike. But I had no idea that was just the opening salvo in a war I didn't even know I was fighting. The desert heat radiating off the pavement felt nothing compared to the fire building in my chest. This woman was about to learn that some veterans don't back down from bullies, no matter how many Botox injections they hide behind. 2 weeks later, Connor returned for our monthly support group meeting. I was actually starting to feel optimistic. Maybe Vivian had gotten her petty power fix and would leave us alone. Yeah, right. I should have known better than to underestimate a sociopath with a Home Depot credit card. Connor parked in the same guest spot, legally and properly. We had a good session that night. 6 guys working through our demons, sharing stories that would make civilians lose sleep. Connor stayed over like always, planning to drive back to Phoenix the next morning after his usual sunrise coffee ritual. 5 a.m. rolled around, and you know the rest. Glass exploding like grenades, my buddy's truck getting the crowbar treatment from our neighborhood's resident psychopath. But here's where things get interesting. While I'm standing there in my boxers, watching $8,000 of destruction through my window, Connor appears beside me, calm as you please, like he's watching the morning weather report instead of his pride and joy getting demolished. "You getting this on camera?" he asks quietly, voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "Every glorious second." "Good." He pulls out his phone, starts recording from a different angle. Let her finish her masterpiece. Most people would be screaming, calling 911, running outside to stop the carnage. Not Connor. This man has ice water in his veins, and a mind that thinks 3 chess moves ahead while you're still figuring out how the pieces move. I learned to trust those instincts in Fallujah, and I sure wasn't going to stop now. Vivian finishes her vandalism symphony, windows spiderwebbed into abstract art, tires deflated like punctured egos, and the pièce de résistance, "No military trash," carved deep into the tailgate with the precision of a woman who clearly practiced her penmanship. The acrid smell of rubber and broken glass hangs in the cool morning air as she surveys her handiwork with the satisfaction of Picasso finishing Guernica. Then she does something that makes my blood freeze mid-boil. She walks over to the Hendersons' house next door and hands a crisp $20 bill to their teenage son, Tyler. Kid pockets the cash faster than a politician takes a bribe. Vivian points at Connor's truck, makes some elaborate hand gestures like she's directing a Broadway show, then melts back into the pre-dawn darkness like the suburban vampire she is. "She just bought herself a witness," Connor observes, still recording. His voice carries that particular tone I remember from Iraq, the one that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. 20 minutes later, Phoenix PD arrives. Vivian's already there in her designer jogging outfit, because apparently Lululemon makes special "I just committed a felony" activewear, complete with tears that would make a daytime soap actress weep with envy. "Officers, I was on my morning run when that truck nearly ran me down," she wails, pointing at Connor like he's wanted for war crimes. The driver was aggressive, threatening. I was in absolute fear for my life. Tyler Henderson steps forward right on cue, delivering his lines with all the conviction of a high school drama club understudy. "Yeah, I totally saw everything from my bedroom window. That truck was driving crazy, swerving all over. The lady had to jump out of the way like she was dodging bullets." The cops look at Connor like he's public enemy number 1. Here's this big guy with military tattoos and a 1,000-yard stare, standing next to a demolished truck while wearing yesterday's clothes. The optics aren't exactly screaming innocent victim. "Sir, we're going to need you to come with us," the younger officer says, hand already drifting toward his cuffs with the eagerness of someone who watches too much reality TV. That's when I step forward with my phone, feeling like Perry Mason about to deliver the courtroom bombshell. "Officers, before you do anything irreversible, you might want to see this little home movie I accidentally filmed." The security footage tells a completely different story. Crystal clear, 4K video of Vivian committing felony vandalism while Tyler sleeps peacefully in his room, curtains drawn tighter than Fort Knox. The timestamp shows 5:03 a.m., exactly when she claimed to be jogging and nearly murdered by a parked truck. You know, my dad always told me that video evidence beats tearful testimonies every single time. He was a cop for 30 years, seen every scam in the book. Son, he'd say, cameras don't have emotions, and they sure as hell don't lie for money. Smart man, my dad. The older cop watches the footage twice, then looks at Vivian with the expression of someone who just discovered they've been eating roadkill instead of premium steak. Ma'am, you want to explain how you were nearly run down by a parked truck? Vivian's Botox-frozen face attempts several expressions: shock, indignation, panic, and what I can only describe as deer in headlights meets reality TV meltdown. That's not... The camera angle is totally misleading. I was defending myself from future aggressive behavior. From a truck that was turned off? The arrest happens faster than you can say felony destruction of property. Handcuffs, Miranda rights, the whole 9 yards. Tyler Henderson suddenly develops amnesia about his $20 testimony, mumbling something about being asleep and not seeing anything clearly. But here's where my real counterattack begins, and it's sweeter than my grandmother's peach cobbler. While Vivian's getting acquainted with the back seat of a police cruiser, I'm working my phone like a campaign manager on election night. First call, Arizona Department of Real Estate. Turns out filing false police reports isn't exactly compatible with maintaining your professional license. Who knew? Second call goes to every news station in the Phoenix metro area. Local HOA president arrested for vandalizing veteran's truck is exactly the kind of David versus Goliath story that gets ratings and makes producers salivate. The sweet scent of mesquite barbecue smoke drifted from my backyard that evening as Connor and I debriefed over cold beers and perfectly grilled steaks. "This is bigger than your HOA, Garrett," he said quietly, staring into the desert sunset. "Way bigger than you realize." I should have paid more attention to that warning. You'd think getting arrested on live television would humble most people. You'd be wrong. Vivian Blackwood got out on bail 12 hours later, and apparently spending a night in county lockup had only sharpened her appetite for revenge. The retaliation started small, like a rash that spreads when you scratch it. Monday morning, I woke up to find 7, count them, 7, bright yellow violation notices plastered across my front door like confetti from hell. My mailbox was 2 inches too high. My doormat was non-regulation beige instead of the approved desert sand. My garden hose was visible from the street. Each citation carried a $100 fine, because apparently Vivian had discovered the joy of financial waterboarding. But she wasn't content stopping with me. By Wednesday, half the neighborhood looked like a yellow fever outbreak. Mrs. Henderson got dinged for excessive bird feeding. Apparently mourning doves eating millet violates some obscure wildlife management clause buried in page 47 of the CC&Rs. The Johnsons across the street got hit for their kids' chalk art on the driveway. Even 80-year-old Rosemarie Kowalski, who walks with a cane and volunteers at the church food bank, received a notice about her improperly maintained walkway lighting. That's when I knew Vivian had crossed the line from petty tyrant into full-blown domestic terrorist. The smell of fresh coffee and righteous indignation filled Rosemarie's kitchen when I knocked on her door Thursday morning. This woman had been a paralegal for 30 years before retiring, and she had the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades catching lawyers in their own BS. "Garrett, honey, sit down," she said, pouring me a cup that could wake the dead. "I've been reading these HOA documents all night, and something stinks worse than a fish market in August." She spread financial statements across her dining table like she was planning the D-Day invasion. "Look at this landscaping expenditure from last spring. $47,000 for community beautification." I studied the invoices, my electrician's brain automatically checking the math. "Rose, these improvements only cover 4 houses, all on Vivian's street, including hers." Rosemarie tapped the paper with a manicured nail that had probably signed more legal documents than most judges. "That's not community improvement. That's embezzlement disguised as landscaping." Here's something I learned during my divorce proceedings that saved my financial bacon. Always follow the money trail, because thieves get sloppy when they think nobody's watching. My lawyer taught me that corporate records are public information. You just have to know where to look. Most people, he told me, assume financial crimes are too complicated to catch, but it's usually just basic arithmetic with fancy names. We spent the morning creating what Rosemary called our evidence file. Every selective enforcement case we could document, every financial irregularity, every violation notice that seemed designed more to harass than to maintain property values. The pattern emerged like a photograph developing in solution. Vivian Blackwood wasn't just power-hungry. She was running a systematic con game.
My brother-in-law, Rick, he's an accountant who never met a number he couldn't make confess its secrets, ran the HOA's management company through Arizona's Corporation Commission database. The results made my stomach drop faster than a lead balloon. "Garrett," he said over the phone, "your management company is owned by Blackwood Property Services, LLC. Guess who the registered agent is?" Let me take a wild guess. Someone with a plastic surgeon husband and a personality disorder? Her brother-in-law, Marcus Blackwood. They've been overcharging your HOA about 40% above market rates for the past 2 years. I estimate they've skimmed roughly $190,000 from resident assessments. That evening, while the desert sunset painted the mountains the color of Vivian's rage, I did something that would have made my old drill sergeant proud. I organized. The Saguaro Springs Truth Facebook group started with just me and Rosemary. By midnight, we had 37 members. By the end of the week, 127 residents had joined, sharing their own tales of HOA abuse like confessions at a revival meeting. Vietnam vet Charlie Martinez posted photos of his 23 violation notices received in 1 month. Apparently his Purple Heart license plate was too ostentatious. Single mom Jessica Troy documented how Vivian had reported her suspicious activity to Child Protective Services. Her crime? Working night shifts as an ER nurse and having different cars pick up her kids from school. The stories kept pouring in like water through a broken dam. Each post revealed another layer of Vivian's systematic targeting of anyone she deemed undesirable. Veterans, minorities, single parents, blue-collar workers. The woman wasn't just drunk on power. She was running a neighborhood ethnic cleansing campaign with HOA bylaws as her weapon of choice. But here's what I learned from my years in the service. Every tyrant has the same weakness. They can't resist showing off their power. While we were building our case quietly, methodically, Vivian was busy escalating her campaign like she was competing for a gold medal in suburban fascism. The breaking point came when she filed a formal complaint with the city, claiming our PTSD support group was a drug rehabilitation meeting, operating without proper permits. She actually wrote to the VA, suggesting they investigate Connor and me for suspicious behavior indicating possible substance abuse. That night, as the sound of coyotes echoed across the desert like nature's own warning system, Connor called with news that made my blood sing with anticipation. "Garrett, remember when I said this was bigger than your HOA? Tomorrow morning, you're going to find out exactly how much bigger." For the first time in months, I went to sleep with a smile on my face. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp desert air that makes you believe anything is possible. I should have known Vivian would turn possibility into nightmare. She didn't wait for whatever Connor had planned. She escalated first, and this time, she went full scorched earth. I was grabbing my usual burnt coffee at the Circle K when I spotted her white Tesla parked across from my workplace, the city electrical department, where I'd been fixing streetlights and traffic signals for 8 years without so much as a tardy slip. She sat there for 20 minutes, engine purring like a mechanical predator, air conditioning blasting because, God forbid, her Botox melt in the Arizona heat. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust mixed with her perfume when she rolled down her window to make a phone call. Even from 50 yards away, I could see her animated hand gestures. She was painting me as public enemy number 1, to someone who obviously hadn't met her yet. The next day, my supervisor Jim pulled me into his cramped office with the expression of someone who'd rather be getting a root canal. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and broken dreams. Jim's been trying to quit both smoking and this job for the past decade. "Garrett, I got a call yesterday from some HOA president," he said, studying his coffee mug like it held the secrets of the universe. "Claims you've been making threats, acting erratic, says you might be having some kind of PTSD episode that could endanger city property." My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. "Jim, you've known me for 8 years. When have I ever—" I know.
He waved his hands like he was surrendering to an invisible army. But she was very convincing, professional sounding, mentioned liability issues if something happens, and we ignored the warning signs.
Here's what I learned during my military service that applies to civilian bureaucrats. They're more afraid of paperwork than they are of doing the right thing. Jim put me on administrative leave pending investigation, which is government speak for guilty until you prove you're not crazy. But Vivian's character assassination tour was just getting started. That afternoon, a private investigator materialized at my front door like a bad debt collector. Tall guy, cheap polyester suit that probably came with its own fire hazard warning, and a smile that looked like it had been borrowed from a used car salesman. "Mr. Thornfield, I'm conducting a routine background investigation. Nothing to worry about. Just some questions about your military service, your divorce, any history of substance abuse or violent tendencies." I invited him in, served him iced tea that could have doubled as antifreeze, and answered every question with the patience of a kindergarten teacher. Because here's what most people don't understand about combat veterans. We learned to spot the difference between real threats and amateur hour. This guy was definitely amateur hour with a private investigator license. "Who's paying your retainer?" I asked as he packed up his dollar store notebook. "Can't divulge that information, but someone's genuinely concerned about your mental stability, particularly your relationship with other veterans who might be influencing your behavior." Connor. They were fishing for dirt on Connor and coming up empty-handed as a politician's promise. That evening, while the smoky sweetness of backyard barbecues filled the desert air and cicadas provided nature's soundtrack, Connor called with news that made my head spin like a slot machine hitting jackpot. "She knows who I am," he announced without preamble, or at least she thinks she does. How's that work? Private eye she hired got lazy, ran a basic background check instead of doing actual detective work. Shows I work for the state attorney general's office, but missed the fine print about my actual job description. I could hear the predatory satisfaction in his voice. "So she thinks you're some pencil-pushing clerk instead of the guy who sends corrupt officials to federal prison." Bingo. And brother, she just made the kind of mistake that ends careers and starts prison sentences. The mistake arrived at 9:47 p.m. via burner phone, because apparently Vivian's criminal education came entirely from Netflix crime shows. Connor recorded every glorious second of her attempting to bribe a federal prosecutor. "I know you work for the Attorney General's office," she purred through the cheap connection, sounding like a suburban soccer mom ordering cocaine. "But everyone has a price, and I'm prepared to be very, very generous. $500,000 in cash, completely untraceable." "What would I need to do for this generous offer?" Connor asked, playing his role like Marlon Brando in his prime. "Make some paperwork disappear. HOA investigation files, financial records, that sort of tedious government nonsense. You help me, I help you retire early to somewhere warm." 23 minutes of conversation, 23 minutes of Vivian Blackwood gift-wrapping a federal prosecution case with confessions of embezzlement, bribery, witness tampering, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The next morning, drunk on her own cleverness, she waltzed into the Arizona Attorney General's headquarters, carrying a briefcase full of cash and the confidence of someone who'd never met a problem Daddy's money couldn't solve. Security footage captured her asking the receptionist for "that clerk Connor who handles HOA paperwork." The final camera recorded the exact moment her face realized she'd just tried to bribe the Assistant Attorney General, in charge of putting people like her behind bars. Picture a coyote in a Roadrunner cartoon, the moment it looks down and realizes there's no ground under its feet. That was Vivian Blackwood, discovering she'd just handed a federal corruption prosecutor enough evidence to end her freedom. She literally stood frozen for 30 seconds, briefcase clutched in her death grip, while reality crashed down like an Arizona thunderstorm. The real storm was just beginning. The arrest at the Attorney General's office was just the appetizer. The main course came when Connor walked me through what they'd really been investigating for the past 8 months. "Garrett, you need to sit down for this," Connor said, spreading classified files across my kitchen table, like he was dealing cards in the world's most dangerous poker game. The afternoon sun streaming through my blinds cast prison bar shadows across documents stamped "Federal Investigation, Confidential,"
The smell of fresh ink from legal paperwork mixed with my cooling coffee as Connor laid out a conspiracy that made my HOA problems look like a neighborhood spat over fence height. Your nightmare with Vivian? She's not some lone wolf suburban dictator. She's a foot soldier in a criminal enterprise that makes the mafia look disorganized. Connor's finger traced connections on a flowchart that resembled a spiderweb designed by a mathematician on methamphetamines. It started 18 months ago with a tip from Scottsdale. HOA president there embezzled 200 grand from their community center renovation fund. When our financial crimes unit dug deeper, the same management company kept appearing in similar schemes across 4 counties. Blackwood Property Services wasn't Marcus Blackwood's side hustle. It was the nerve center of a $12 million racketeering operation spanning 63 Arizona HOAs. Their method was surgical: infiltrate boards through planted candidates like Vivienne, then systematically drain community funds through phantom contracts, inflated invoices, and kickback schemes that would make a Chicago alderman blush. 12 million? The number hit me like a physical blow. Conservative estimate based on what we can prove, but here's what really makes my blood boil. It wasn't just theft. Connor's jaw tightened as he opened a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Civil Rights Division case files. Systematic harassment campaigns targeting minorities, veterans, and working-class families across dozens of communities. Same playbook everywhere: selective enforcement, weaponized fine structures, orchestrated intimidation designed to force undesirable residents to sell below market value. The papers felt heavy in my hands, weighted with other people's suffering. Story after story of families destroyed by HOA terrorism. A Hispanic family in Tucson fined into foreclosure for excessive cultural decorations, meaning a small Mexican flag in their garden. A Black Marine in Flagstaff who received 47 violations in 2 months until he sold his house at a $30,000 loss. They call it community enhancement, Connor said, disgust dripping from every syllable. The FBI calls it conspiracy to violate civil rights with a hate crime enhancement. My hands were shaking as the scope hit me. How long have you known about Vivian? 8 months. Your case was our entry point into the Saguaro Springs cell, but we needed her to commit federal crimes we could document. Connor's smile was predatory. The truck vandalism was perfect. Interstate commerce violation plus civil rights targeting a military service. But we needed her to reveal the bigger network. That's when he dropped the nuclear bomb that made my world tilt sideways. Garrett, you ever wonder how Vivian knew so much personal information about residents? Credit scores, employment problems, medical issues she shouldn't have accessed? The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. Please tell me you're not about to say, corrupt employees at the mortgage company, credit bureaus, county offices, and, this one's going to hurt, the VA Medical Center. She's been buying confidential information on veterans for 2 years. The room spun like I'd taken shrapnel to the head. Some bastard at the VA, the place supposed to protect veterans, had been selling our private medical information to suburban terrorists. Each data breach is a separate federal felony. Identity theft, HIPAA violations, bribery of government officials, conspiracy to violate civil rights. Connor's voice carried the weight of impending justice. We're looking at 25 to life for the ringleaders. He leaned forward, eyes burning with the intensity I remembered from our combat days. Question is, you ready to help us destroy this entire network? I thought about every family they'd terrorized, every veteran they'd targeted, every American dream they'd crushed for profit and prejudice. Tell me what you need. Connor's grin could have cut diamonds. We're throwing a pool party, and every corrupt HOA president, crooked contractor, and bought government official in Arizona is invited. They'll actually come? They think they're celebrating Vivian's legal victory and planning their next target community. His laugh was sharp as breaking glass. They have no idea they're walking into the biggest federal sting operation in Arizona history. Outside, desert thunder rumbled like distant artillery, and I knew the real war was about to begin. The next 60 days turned my quiet desert neighborhood into the most sophisticated federal crime scene in Arizona history, disguised as a community pool renovation project that smelled like chlorine and justice. Connor explained the RICO framework over breakfast burritos that tasted like victory and green chili fire. The morning air carried the scent of creosote and impending federal prosecutions as he laid out the legal requirements. Racketeering charges need a pattern of criminal activity, minimum 2 related crimes within 10 years by the same criminal enterprise. We've got dozens documented, but we need live evidence of active coordination between network members. The fake pool contractor arrived Tuesday morning in a truck loaded with enough surveillance equipment to monitor a small country. FBI Special Agent Maria Santos, posing as Desert Oasis Pool Construction, had been undercover in Arizona's construction industry for 3 years. She knew which contractors were dirty, which city inspectors had their hands out, and exactly how much cash made building permits magically appear. Your pool's going to be the most bugged body of water since the CIA started watching Castro's hot tub, she told me, installing a camera inside a decorative light fixture with hands steadier than a surgeon's. Every whispered conversation within 50 yards gets recorded in courtroom-quality audio that'll make federal juries convict on the first vote. The cover story was airtight. Saguaro Springs residents had finally scraped together funds to repair the community pool that Vivian's embezzlement had left broken for 18 months. The grand opening celebration would honor our dedicated HOA leadership while showcasing successful community cooperation to other Arizona neighborhoods looking for similar solutions. Rosemary coordinated the pool party planning committee with the precision of a military logistics officer disguised as a church lady. Her contact list read like a criminal enterprise phone directory. Board presidents who'd perfected fund skimming, management executives who specialized in phantom billing, city officials who fast-tracked permits for anyone speaking the universal language of unmarked envelopes. "Honey," she said, addressing invitations with handwriting that belonged on wedding announcements rather than federal sting operations. "These people can't resist bragging about their schemes when they think they're among fellow travelers. Give them premium liquor and an audience of admiring criminals, and they'll confess to felonies we haven't even discovered yet." The invitation campaign was social engineering at its finest. Each corrupt HOA president received a personally crafted message appealing to their specific blend of ego and greed. Vivian's legal victory over federal harassment became a case study other communities could replicate. The pool renovation symbolized HOA independence from government overreach. My role was playing the grateful homeowner who'd learned his lesson about challenging authority. I practiced my defeated veteran routine until I could deliver lines like, "Mrs. Blackwood taught me respect for community leadership," without my breakfast making a return appearance. Connor coached me on surveillance protocols, while the sound of construction equipment masked our conversations. The wire, smaller than a button battery, transmitted to FBI receivers hidden in the new pool equipment shed that hummed with more electronics than mission control. Key phrases we need recorded: financial arrangements, target community selections, government official payoffs. Let them talk. Successful criminals love educating audiences about how they outsmarted the system. The technical preparation was beyond impressive. Miniature cameras lived inside poolside furniture, decorative desert rocks, even the umbrellas that would shade refreshment tables laden with evidence-gathering opportunities. Audio pickups hid within sound system speakers that would provide background music for federal prosecutions. The pool itself contained waterproof recording devices that could capture conversations from tipsy swimmers bragging about their latest schemes. Agent Santos walked me through the construction permit manipulation that let HOA criminals steal millions with government approval. Standard operation: submit legitimate plans for permits, then use substandard materials and pocket 60% of the budget. A legitimate $40,000 renovation becomes a $15,000 job, with $25,000 flowing to offshore accounts. Here's something my electrician training taught me that applies to financial crimes. Always follow the power source, because every system has connection points where the real current flows. In HOA corruption, those connection points were city inspectors who signed off on substandard work in exchange for monthly consulting fees that somehow never involved actual consulting. We designed the pool renovation to trigger multiple bribery opportunities. Santos would offer kickbacks to building inspectors, permit office clerks, and environmental compliance officers. Hidden cameras would document every handshake deal, every cash envelope, every corrupt bargain that kept this criminal network operating like a well-oiled money laundering machine. The guest list metastasized across Arizona's HOA corruption network. Board presidents from Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tucson, and Flagstaff cleared their calendars. Management company executives postponed vacations. Even state legislators who'd been blocking HOA reform bills suddenly found time for a pool party in suburban Phoenix. "It's better than Christmas morning for federal prosecutors," Connor said, reviewing our SVP responses while the desert sunset painted our preparations in shades of anticipated justice. "Every corrupt official in the state is voluntarily walking into our evidence collection celebration." The smell of fresh concrete mixed with desert sage as installation crews finished the legitimate pool renovation, because maintaining cover required actual construction. After 18 months of Vivian's sabotage, our community was finally getting the pool we'd funded, courtesy of a federal investigation. 2 nights before the party, Connor's final briefing carried the weight of combat preparation. "Garrett, if anything goes sideways, if someone gets suspicious, if the situation turns dangerous, you follow extraction protocols exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. These people have committed murder to protect smaller secrets than what we're exposing." The night wind whistled through saguaro cacti, like nature's own warning system, reminding me that in 48 hours, I'd be center stage in the biggest corruption takedown in Arizona history. 2 days before the pool party, Vivian's world started crumbling faster than a house of cards in a hurricane, and her desperation turned dangerous. The first sign came when I spotted unfamiliar vehicles parked on my street at odd hours. Black SUVs with tinted windows, the kind that scream private security louder than a bullhorn. Connor's team had warned me this might happen. Cornered criminals often hire muscle when legal options evaporate. Professional paranoia, Agent Santos called it during our morning briefing disguised as a pool equipment inspection. The smell of her industrial-strength coffee mixed with desert dust as she adjusted a hidden camera inside a poolside speaker. Vivian's lawyers probably told her the federal case is bulletproof. When legal defense fails, some people resort to witness intimidation. The intimidation started subtle, like carbon monoxide poisoning. My mail disappeared for 3 days running. Someone keyed my truck in the grocery store parking lot, carving "snitch" deep enough to require bodywork. Anonymous flyers appeared on doorsteps throughout the neighborhood, warning residents about outside agitators and communist infiltration of American communities. But Vivian's masterpiece of desperation came Thursday night, when I discovered someone had cut my home's electrical main line, a federal crime that could have killed anyone who touched it without proper equipment. Lucky for the saboteur, they picked the wrong target. 30 years as an electrician means I recognize amateur hour when I see it, and whoever did this had watched too many action movies. Connor arrived within minutes of my call, bringing FBI technical specialists, who treated my yard like a crime scene. They found boot prints, tool marks, even DNA evidence on the wire cutters carelessly dropped behind my air conditioning unit. "She's recruiting local help," Connor said, photographing the evidence while crime scene tape fluttered in the desert breeze. "Probably paying cash for anonymous sabotage. The DNA will tell us who, but more importantly, it proves she's actively obstructing a federal investigation." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Tyler Henderson, the teenage witness Vivian had bribed to lie about Connor's truck. Turns out guilt weighs heavier on young consciences than $20 bills. "Mr. Thornfield?" Tyler appeared at my door Friday morning, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. The kid was maybe 17, all elbows and acne, and the kind of nervous energy that comes from carrying secrets too big for teenage shoulders. "I need to tell you something about Mrs. Blackwood, something really bad." We sat on my front porch while Tyler unloaded a confession that would make federal prosecutors dance with joy. Vivian hadn't just bribed him once. She'd been paying him $50 a week for 6 months to spy on neighbors, report unusual activity, and spread carefully crafted rumors designed to isolate her targets. "She gave me a list of people to watch," Tyler said, pulling out his phone to show screenshots he'd wisely saved. "Veterans, minorities, anyone she called problematic residents. I was supposed to document their visitors, take pictures of license plates, report anything she could use against them." The kid had been unknowingly building surveillance files on half the neighborhood. Photos of Connor's visits, documentation of our PTSD support group meetings, even pictures of Rosemary's late-night strategy sessions that looked suspicious to anyone who didn't know we were planning a federal sting operation. But Tyler's bombshell revelation made my blood freeze. She's planning something for the pool party, something she called the final solution for problem residents. She gave me $500 to help, but I'm scared, Mr. Thornfield. Really scared. Connor's emergency response team assembled in my living room within an hour. Maps, photos, and communication equipment turned my coffee table into a command center that would have impressed Pentagon war planners. What kind of help did she want? Agent Santos asked Tyler, her voice carrying the deadly calm of someone who'd interrogated terrorists. She wants me to put something in the pool's filtration system during the party. She called it a harmless prank that would embarrass some people. Tyler's hands shook as he described Vivian's instructions. But she was lying, wasn't she? It's not harmless. Connor and Santos exchanged looks that could have powered the electrical grid. Chemical sabotage of a public gathering was domestic terrorism, carrying life sentences under federal anti-terrorism statutes. Tyler, Connor said, with the patience of someone talking a jumper off a ledge, you just prevented what could have been a mass casualty event. You're going to testify for the prosecution, and you're going to be protected by the full resources of the federal government. The next 24 hours blurred into a nightmare of emergency preparations. The pool party couldn't be canceled without alerting the criminal network that we were on to them. Instead, it became a double operation. Federal sting meets counterterrorism response. Additional FBI agents were positioned as catering staff, maintenance workers, even pool party guests. Hazmat teams stood by in case Vivian had backup plans beyond Tyler's recruitment. Military explosive ordnance disposal specialists swept the entire area for devices we might have missed. The desert night before the party carried an electric tension that had nothing to do with approaching storms. As I lay awake staring at my ceiling, wondering if tomorrow would end with justice or body bags, Connor's words echoed like a mantra. Sometimes, the only way to catch a monster is to let it reveal how monstrous it's willing to become. Tomorrow's pool party was about to become the most dangerous neighborhood gathering in American history, and I was the guest of honor at my own potential funeral. Pool party morning arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that makes desert rattlesnakes seek shade, and federal agents sweat through their surveillance equipment. The thermometer hit 95 degrees by 8 a.m., and the day's real temperature, measured in criminal desperation, was climbing toward nuclear. Vivian's final gambit began at sunrise, when Tyler Henderson called in a panic that made my coffee taste like liquid anxiety. Mr. Thornfield, she knows I talked to you. Tyler's voice cracked like puberty was hitting him again. She came to my house at 5 this morning, banging on the door like she was trying to break it down. She knows about the FBI. My blood turned to ice water despite the rising heat. What exactly did she say? She said if I showed up at the pool party, she'd make sure my family paid the price. She knows my dad's business has tax problems, knows my mom's immigration status isn't perfect. She's threatening to destroy our entire family if I testify. Connor arrived at my house 10 minutes later, moving with the controlled urgency of someone whose carefully planned operation had just encountered a live grenade. The smell of his stress sweat mixed with desert dust as he coordinated emergency response protocols through an earpiece that connected him to FBI command. She's panicking, he said, pacing my living room like a caged predator. Panic makes desperate criminals attempt desperate measures. The question is, how desperate is Vivian willing to get? The answer came 2 hours later, when Agent Santos discovered someone had tampered with the pool's chemical storage facility overnight. The lock was cut, the security cameras were spray-painted black, and industrial-grade pool chemicals had been repositioned in ways that suggested someone with basic chemistry knowledge had been conducting very dangerous experiments. Chlorine gas, Santos explained, her face grim as desert storm clouds. Mix the wrong chemicals in the wrong proportions, and you've got a weapon of mass destruction disguised as a pool maintenance accident. Dozens of people could die, and it would look like tragic negligence rather than deliberate murder. The pool party had become a potential crime scene for domestic terrorism, and canceling it wasn't an option. Too many corrupt officials had cleared their schedules, traveled from other cities, rearranged criminal operations to attend this celebration. Calling it off would scatter the network like roaches when the lights come on. Instead, Connor made a decision that proved why he was Arizona's top corruption prosecutor. We were going forward, but with enough federal backup to invade a small country. FBI hazmat specialists neutralized the chemical sabotage while disguised as routine pool maintenance. Military explosive ordnance disposal experts swept every inch of the property for secondary devices.
Even the food service was replaced with federal agents trained in counter-terrorism operations, because poisoning party snacks was apparently within Vivian's expanding repertoire of suburban warfare. She's not just trying to avoid prosecution, Connor explained while supervising the security preparations that had transformed my neighborhood into a federal fortress. She's planning to eliminate witnesses, destroy evidence, and create enough chaos to escape during the confusion. The guest list had become a who's who of Arizona corruption, and they were walking into the most heavily monitored space outside of Pentagon briefing rooms. Hidden cameras captured license plates as vehicles arrived. Facial recognition software identified known criminals attempting to attend under false identities. Audio surveillance equipment recorded conversations from the moment people stepped out of their cars. But Vivian's pièce de résistance was yet to come. At 11 a.m., just as the first guests began arriving, she made one final attempt at witness intimidation that crossed every legal line in the federal criminal code. A black SUV pulled up to Connor's Phoenix apartment building, and two men in expensive suits attempted to serve him with fake legal papers, claiming he was under investigation for abuse of federal authority. The problem with their plan? Connor lived in a secure federal building, and the two process servers were immediately detained by FBI security for attempting to impersonate government officials while carrying concealed weapons and a briefcase full of what would later be identified as forged federal documents. She hired professional intimidators, Connor told me over secure radio, while I watched HOA board presidents and corrupt contractors mingle around my supposedly sabotaged pool. Ex-military, criminal backgrounds, paid $20,000 cash to make me disappear before the party ended. The irony was delicious. While Vivian thought she was neutralizing the federal prosecutor building her case, Connor was actually coordinating the largest public corruption sting in Arizona history from FBI Mobile Command Center, disguised as a catering truck parked 50 yards from my backyard. "Garrett, she's about to arrive," Agent Santos whispered through my nearly invisible earpiece. "Remember your role, grateful homeowner who learned to respect HOA authority. Let her think she's won, let her get comfortable, and let her start bragging to her criminal friends about how she outsmarted the federal government." Through my kitchen window, I watched Vivian Blackwood's white Tesla pull into my driveway like a shark arriving at a blood-filled feeding ground. She stepped out wearing a sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, designer sunglasses that screamed, "I'm above the law," and a smile that belonged on a serial killer's dating profile. The final act was about to begin, and every federal agent in Arizona was watching. The grand opening celebration looked like a suburban block party designed by federal prosecutors with unlimited budgets and terminal cases of justice fever. 73 guests mingled around the crystal-clear pool that sparkled under Arizona sun like liquid diamonds. Board presidents from 12 different HOAs, management company executives, 3 city councilmen, 2 county commissioners, and enough corrupt contractors to rebuild half of Phoenix, all gathered to celebrate what they believed was Vivian Blackwood's victory over federal tyranny. The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with expensive cologne and the metallic scent of impending arrests as I played my role to perfection, the defeated veteran who'd learned to appreciate proper community leadership. "Mrs. Blackwood really opened my eyes," I told Phoenix HOA President Marcus Webb, who'd embezzled $40,000 from his community's earthquake insurance fund. "Sometimes we veterans need civilian guidance to understand how neighborhoods really work." Webb's laugh carried the smug satisfaction of someone who believed he was educating a reformed troublemaker. "Exactly. Military types think they can challenge established systems, but HOAs require finesse, diplomacy, business understanding." Every word was being recorded by surveillance equipment hidden in poolside furniture that the FBI had installed with the precision of Swiss watchmakers. 47 separate audio and video recording devices captured conversations that would make federal juries reach unanimous guilty verdicts in record time. Vivian held court near the pool's deep end,
surrounded by admirers who hung on her every word like disciples receiving wisdom from their criminal messiah. She wore victory like designer perfume, describing her legal triumph over federal harassment with the confidence of someone who believed she'd outsmarted the entire justice system. "The key is documentation," she explained to Tucson's Sandra Martinez, who'd been fining Hispanic residents for excessive cultural displays while approving identical decorations for white neighbors. "Every violation notice, every fine, every enforcement action has to look completely legitimate on paper. The feds can't prove discrimination if your paperwork is perfect." Agent Santos, disguised as the pool contractor receiving final payment, approached with an envelope containing marked bills and a recording device that could capture whispered confessions in a thunderstorm. "Mrs. Blackwood, here's your standard 15% commission on the renovation project," Santos said, loudly enough for nearby microphones to capture every syllable. "$47,000 total project cost, so your management fee comes to $7,050. This was it, the moment federal prosecutors had been building toward for 8 months. Vivian accepted the envelope with the casual confidence of someone who'd received thousands of similar payments. She opened it, counted the cash openly, and made the comment that would haunt her for the rest of her prison sentence. "Perfect. This brings my personal take from Saguaro Springs to just over $200,000. Not bad for 18 months of community service." She laughed like she just told the world's funniest joke. "These residents are so grateful for professional management. They don't even notice when their assessments fund my vacation home in Cabo." The conversation stopped. The entire pool deck went silent, except for the gentle lapping of water that would soon reflect the blue and red lights of federal law enforcement vehicles. That's when Connor stepped forward from behind the refreshment table, removing his disguise as a catering server to reveal the badge that transformed him from helpful neighbor to Arizona Attorney General. The sound of his badge hitting sunlight was like a gunshot in the desert silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Connor announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd just become the most powerful law enforcement official at a criminal gathering. "I'm Connor McKenzie, Arizona Attorney General. You're all under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and corruption of public officials." Vivian's face underwent a transformation that no amount of plastic surgery could have achieved. Her designer confidence evaporated like water on hot asphalt, replaced by the pure, undiluted terror of someone who just realized they'd been living in a federal prosecutor's carefully constructed trap for 8 months. She literally froze in place, envelope of marked bills clutched in her manicured hands, while her brain processed the impossible reality. The quiet veteran's friend she'd been targeting wasn't just some low-level government clerk. He was the Arizona Attorney General who prosecuted public corruption cases. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice carrying all the conviction of someone watching their entire criminal empire collapse in real time. You're just some nobody who works in an office." Connor's smile could have melted steel. "Ma'am, I don't just work for the Attorney General's office. I am the Attorney General. And you've just confessed to federal crimes in front of 73 witnesses, 47 recording devices, and enough FBI agents to fill a small courtroom." The pool party guests began looking around like prairie dogs who'd just heard gunshots, finally noticing that half the catering staff and maintenance workers were now displaying federal badges and drawing service weapons. FBI agents emerged from every conceivable hiding spot, behind landscaping, inside the pool equipment shed, even rising from underwater positions in the pool itself, like some kind of law enforcement SEAL team. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed across the desert like metallic applause, as the largest public corruption arrest in Arizona history unfolded around a suburban swimming pool that finally, after 18 months of criminal sabotage, was ready for its first honest swim. 6 months later, I'm floating in our crystal-clear community pool, watching Connor practice his backstroke while federal prosecutors in Washington, D.C. use our case as a template for nationwide HOA reform legislation. The trials were swift and brutal. When you have 73 defendants caught on high-definition video confessing to federal crimes, plea bargaining becomes the only option that doesn't involve dying in prison. Vivian Blackwood received 8 years in federal prison, plus $2.3 million in restitution, every penny she'd stolen from communities across Arizona. Her plastic surgeon husband filed for divorce the day after sentencing, claiming he'd been an innocent victim of her criminal enterprise. The judge wasn't buying it, especially after discovering their joint offshore accounts contained another $400,000 in embezzled HOA funds. Marcus Blackwood, the management company mastermind, got 5 years and forfeiture of every property he'd purchased with stolen money. His company was dissolved, its assets distributed among the communities they'd victimized. Turns out, running a criminal enterprise through corporate structures doesn't make it legal, just more traceable. The ripple effects transformed Arizona's HOA landscape like a legal earthquake. 12 corrupt board presidents across 4 counties faced federal charges. 6 city officials were arrested for accepting bribes. Even 3 state legislators who'd blocked HOA reform bills found themselves explaining their campaign contributions from Blackwood Property Services to very unsympathetic federal investigators. But the real victory was community healing that you could smell in the desert air during our monthly neighborhood barbecues. Saguaro Springs elected a reform board that actually represents residents instead of criminal enterprises. Our monthly community meetings moved from secretive executive sessions to open forums where families share concerns without fear of retaliation. Property values increased 12% after news broke that our neighborhood had helped expose the largest HOA corruption network in state history. The pool became our symbol of renewal. Kids cannonball into water that's finally safe because we know exactly which chemicals are being used by legitimate contractors. Parents relax on pool decks that aren't bugged by federal surveillance equipment, just occupied by neighbors who've learned that democracy works better with transparency than tyranny. Rosemarie married Charlie Martinez last month. Turns out fighting corruption together is excellent relationship foundation. Their wedding reception was held in our community center, which we renamed Thornfield Veterans Hall, after residents insisted on honoring my role in exposing the criminal network. I argued against the name, but got outvoted by people who understand that sometimes ordinary citizens have to do extraordinary things to protect their communities. The Federal Restitution Fund established the Saguaro Springs Veterans Scholarship, providing $50,000 annually for military families' children attending college. Connor insisted the first recipient be Tyler Henderson, whose courage in exposing Vivian's terrorism plot probably saved dozens of lives. The kid's studying criminal justice at Arizona State, planning to become an FBI agent specializing in public corruption cases. Connor got promoted to Deputy Attorney General, with responsibility for a new statewide task force investigating HOA corruption. His office has received over 300 complaints from residents across Arizona, each one a potential federal case built on our successful prosecution model. "We've got enough evidence to keep prosecutors busy for the next decade," he told me during our most recent PTSD support group meeting, which now includes 8 veterans who found healing through community service and legal justice. Turns out suburban corruption is like cockroaches. Once you shine light in the right places, you discover infestations everywhere. Connor's working on a book about the case, tentatively titled Poolside Justice: How One HOA War Exposed America's Suburban Criminal Underground. Hollywood producers are already calling, though I've told them they can make their movie as long as they don't cast anyone who looks better than me, which, unfortunately, eliminates most of Hollywood. The desert sunset paints our neighborhood in shades of gold and possibility as families gather for another monthly community celebration. Children's laughter echoes off houses that are finally homes instead of targets. Veterans display American flags without fear of persecution. Immigrants plant cultural gardens without harassment from HOA fascists. Tonight's barbecue features Connor's famous green chili cheeseburgers and stories that prove ordinary people can defeat extraordinary corruption when they refuse to accept tyranny as the price of homeownership.